Welcome to the Growth Now Movement. I'm your host, Justin Shank. I'm an entrepreneur, speaker, and podcaster who years ago decided to go on a journey on how to grow in all areas of my life. What I found out was it's really a matter of focusing on the 4 pillars of life: business, relationships, spirituality, and wellness. And that's what we do here. We explore how to continuously grow in those areas, all while having a ton of fun doing it. I'm really excited you're on this journey with me. Now let's get to this week's episode. This week, I sit down with Mike Kim. Mike returns to the show and shares so much valuable information about building your brand and why you are the brand. I'm so excited to have him back. As you guys know, the Mike Kim story about how much he's helped my business. But if you don't know who he is, you can obviously go back and listen to the first time he was on the show, or I'll read his bio. Mike Kim is a sought-after speaker, online educator, copywriter, and consultant to some of today's top thought leaders and personal brands. He's also the host of the top-ranked and rated podcast, the Brand You Podcast. In this episode, Mike and I dive deep into why you are the brand and how you should approach your entire business plan based off of who you are versus who you're trying to be. And as you guys know, I absolutely love these types of conversations. By the way, he's got a brand new book out. It came out today. Make sure you go get it on Amazon or wherever else you can get it. He mentions it here, which is called You Are the Brand. He's got a ton of free giveaways with it. So go grab it today. It is an absolute game changer. I'm reading it now, loving it so far, and I know you guys will as well. Now, before we get to the episode, I want to let you guys know that if you haven't heard yet, we do a 4 Pillars retreat twice a year. This one coming up in October in New Orleans. There are just a couple of spots left. We would love it if you would join us. Here's the fun part. This time around, we're bringing in guest teachers and lecturers, and Mike Kim is going to come in and not only just spend the weekend with us, but teach you some amazing things. So not only learn from myself and Lauren and Adam, but come and learn from Mike one-on-one and get to know him and truly pick his brain, because this is going to be a life-changing experience for so many, just like it was back in March. So if you are interested, send me an email, justin@growthnowmovement.com, and we will see if it's a fit for you. Now, without further ado, let's get to the episode with Mike Kim. Mike, welcome back to the show, man.
Dude, it is great to be here. Thank you for having me. I hope I don't overstay my podcast visits.
Dude, well, this is guest spot number 2 for you on my show. We're hoping for a lot more in the future. And because you know, as well as anybody, I'm a big fan of you. I'm a big fan of what you do. I'm a big fan of how you teach, how your personal brand was built, what you do on Instagram. Like, to me, it's the ultimate package. I literally, right before we hopped on this call, I just put a post on Instagram about I refuse to do anything that's not fun. And I feel like you fit in that box as well. Like, why would I do it if it's not fun? And I love that, man. And now here we are, finally, the book's out. Today is the day the book came out, and I'm really, really excited for people to hear about it, man. But why don't we go through the process first of you writing this book and what that was like over the last year plus of your life, and then we'll get into the goodness of the book.
Most people don't know this. I signed this book deal 5 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
And I never wrote the book because literally just a few weeks after I signed the book deal is when my personal life went sideways. And we've talked about this on the last time I was on the show. But I was married for 10 years. And then, my wife at the time was like, hey, we got some stuff going on. And long story short, the marriage didn't survive. And I did not have any creative energy. Bro, you talk about growth now movement. That was like, okay, survive now. So I cut everything else I was doing at work that wasn't completely foundationally necessary for me to survive during that time, and the book got put on the chopping block. It's funny, one of those things that people used to say to me, oh, it's good even if you're going through something like that, it'll be good that you're working because work will take your mind off things for 8 hours a day. Yeah, if you work in an office. Right. If you work at your house, you have nothing to do except mope and be depressed. So the book got put on the chopping block, and then, bro, it became this thing that was just this gremlin nagging me of shame, of guilt. Why am I not writing this book? Then it became a burden, and it became this constant reminder and source of, honestly, some sort of resentment towards what happened in my personal life because I was like, I should have wrote this book 5 years ago. And every year that passed, I was like, I should have wrote this book a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. My career would be completely different if I written this book back when I signed the deal. Freaking person, then I
Yeah.
got, and then you have to do what you talk a lot about, which is grow up and kind of take ownership over some stuff. And so the process of writing the book, that's actually, I started and stopped many times over the years.
Right.
When the pandemic hit, I was like, if I don't write it this year, I'm literally not going to respect myself anymore. Like, I'm going to look at the guy in the mirror and be like, what else do you want?
Yeah.
Like, what other opportunity could you have asked for to write this freaking book? And I got it done. I hated every minute of writing it. I'm be honest. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Hated every single minute of writing it. And I've loved every single minute of it being done and holding it in my hands. So I know you're working on a book. I just say that to everyone else who's out there who's ever thought about writing a book. I'm being totally honest with you. I've loved holding it in my hands. But yeah, it was emotional when I first got it, for sure.
Dude, I didn't know any of that. I didn't know it was a 5 year ago thing. And I love hearing that stuff because I think that's a great example as to, and we're going to get into building your brand here in a second, but that's a great example as to like your path isn't always what you have laid out in front of you. There's going to be roadblocks. There's going to be hiccups. And you're 100% right. When shit falls apart around you, like, and you're working at home and you're by yourself and you're in this like in your space, it's so hard to get your mind off of the things that are bothering you, let alone get your mind off of something so you can sit down and write this masterpiece, right? I mean, my book has been, for years, I've wanted to write a book. I thought that was going to be my platform to speak. Podcasting just happened to be the one that worked for me. But like, so you're talking 6+ years ago, I was like, I should write a book. I should write a book. Now, for the last 2 years, 2 publishing companies have wanted me to write a book. And finally, just like you, right, the opportunity of the pandemic, I was like, I figured out my framework of the book. I didn't know it before. And the slowness of the world was like, here's your story. And I think that really, when you look at what you've built over the last 4-5 years, right? I mean, you're in a better position now to have written this book and to sell the book and to reach the success that it's going to be starting today for you. Have you found gratitude in those moments as far as like, okay, it makes more sense that it comes out now?
Yeah, definitely. Because like I said, I harbored a little bit of resentment. Not just, at one person or whatever, just the overall, I was like, I got shafted. This sucks. I had this framework 5 years ago. But in the time since, I matured as an expert. I grew my influence. I made more connections. I think about the people that I've gotten to know in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, 2/3 of the people who endorse a book I've gotten to know in the last 5 years. So imagine me going to the market, not having all these allies and all these friends and colleagues ready to rally around me. Imagine I didn't know you. We met right when I was going through the middle of that stuff 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I look back. I remember there were a couple of pivotal moments in this, and I think this is a lesson to anyone who's an entrepreneur or just someone looking to change their life, right? You have these watershed moments. And I remember in September 2020, I was in Los Angeles, and this is during the pandemic lockdown. So nobody's out. And I rented a room at the JW Marriott near Staples Center. It's one of my favorite hotels. It's called LA Live. And I like to be in the sky. And I sent the initial manuscript to our mutual friend, Karen Anderson, who I hired as a book coach. She was amazing. Strategicbookcoach.com. Shout out to Karen. And I emailed it to her, and I knelt down in the suite by the bed, and I just cried. Because I was like, that was the most expensive thing I've ever created. That was 7 years of my life. It was difficult to write about that period of my time because it was about a really tough personal, time in my life. I pivoted careers 2 or 3 times I had a crazy couple of years. So I changed my careers 3 times and went through a divorce all in 3 years. And to write about that, and then to see kind of what opened up for me in the year since, and to have the pandemic come out and have the world at large question whether they want to go back to work for a company or not, or start a business as an expert speaker, creator, or coach as a personal brand. Literally, the timing could not be better.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was just kind of incredible to see the stars align. It makes me sometimes wonder, maybe there is someone out there guiding our path. Sometimes I'm like the least spiritual person you'll ever meet, but there's that.
Well, wait until the retreat in New Orleans where you're a guest speaker. Your mind's gonna open to the spiritual side, and I
Give me
think,
the psychedelics, bro.
dude.
Okay, I'm just kidding.
Well, that's not going to happen, even though we are in New Orleans. And if you want it to happen, I'm sure you can find it. But it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But let's get into the book, man. Right? You Are the Brand. What a great title, first of all. I had a conversation with a good friend, Chris Van Vliet, the other day. He's a 4-time Emmy winner, by the way. And I was telling him about my book, and he's like, "What are you going to call it?" I'm like, "I don't know." And he's like, "Look, The Art of Not Giving a Fuck is a good book, but a great title." And I think this idea of you are the brand, especially this day and age, just hits, right? Like it pops off the page because so many people, like you said, especially with the pandemic ending, do I want to go back to work? You are the brand. But that's such a wide thing to say. What do you mean I am the brand? Like I want to be. I see these influencers. I see these people speaking. I see all this stuff. How does the process begin for individuals? Because I know you go through this in the book. Like how do people go, how can I even be the brand?
Well, the first thing I'll start here is that you mentioned these influencers and what's happening in social media, and we're on the cutting edge of that space. You and I, right? Every day, podcasting, social media, we're way on the cutting edge more than even bigger companies are, right? Because if we don't figure this out, we're out of business.
Yeah.
And yet, I see people try to quote unquote build a brand one of two ways, and neither of them work. Both are absolutely wrong. Okay. The first group of people presents a false version of themselves. I mean, they're just lying. Okay. Now, an extreme example is they rent a mansion on Airbnb, stage a photo shoot, and imply that it's their house. They don't say it's their house, but they're just kind of making an implication. And these folks truly believe that image is enough, that attention is owed to them, not earned.
Wow.
Right. And this does not work. This does not work. People are tired of that crap. Like they can see right through it. Now, the flip side of these people are folks who overshare in the name of authenticity. That's a big word, quote unquote, authenticity. And these folks are selling their struggles. They are like a car wreck on the interstate. Everyone slows down, pays attention to them, but it's short-lived. They don't realize nobody wants to see that stuff. Have you ever scrolled through Facebook and seen someone post a nasty picture of a cut on their leg or their nasty toe? Like nobody wants, as soon as I see that, I block them. I don't care if it's my sister. I'm like, look, that's jarring. And in all seriousness, we're laughing about it, but you post a picture like that or of your actual car wreck, you inconsiderate fool, you jackass. Who knows who you're triggering? What if my parents got killed in a car wreck and I'm scrolling innocently through Facebook one day? Boom. The algorithm just decides to show it to me in the middle of a work call and I start breaking down and crying. Like that hasn't happened, thank God. To me, my parents are both alive and well. But I'm saying these people actually don't care about leading or helping anyone. They just want attention. It's a cry for help. Right.
Yeah, they want that endorphin rush of the likes or the hearts or whatever. Dude, I say all the time, man, like, your open wounds are for you to learn and your scars are to teach. And so many people are teaching from the open wounds and like they're crying on their Instagram stories and like, we don't need this. We don't need it. It's just absolutely crazy. So I love that you bring that up. And as you see these two types of approaches to people trying to build a business or a brand or whatever you want to call it. Obviously, they're both train wrecks. And I think being in the thick of it, like you mentioned, you and I, we pick it up immediately. And there's a lot of people who don't pick it up. So they're like, oh, I should do that because that got a lot of likes. How do people know what to do though? Like, what are the things they can be like, how do I even build a brand around what I'm doing?
So this is really the premise of the book, which is why, you are the brand. The title, the funny story here, maybe this will help you or other authors or aspiring authors. I came up with the title the day before I sent the final manuscript.
Wow.
Literally. And the opening chapter I wrote the night before I sent the final manuscript. I really struggled with it for the working title was the title of my podcast, Brand You. And I was like, okay, whatever. And I had a conversation with a friend. We were texting back and forth, and he asked me, "What do you want to shout from a stage?" And that's where the title came from.
It's so
Because
good.
I can hear myself saying, "Hey, grow up. Don't do this bull crap like influencers do and rent an Airbnb, and don't put your nasty gashes all over Facebook. You're the brand, so go be it." That's where it came out. So the litmus test, really, where you start is you ask yourself an honest, deep question, which I know listeners of this podcast do. Can you build a campfire around what you're sharing? That's the litmus test. By that, I mean, is it warm? Is it inviting? Is it a beacon of light in a world of darkness? Nobody has campfires in the middle of the day. I tell you what, they go to the beach. They put on the campfire at night, right? Is it is it a place where people can share stories? That's what happens at campfires. Is it a place you can build a community around? Right? That's what happens. People gather. That's what you've done with Growth Now. That's what you've done with this podcast. You have, you, Justin, have done the hard work, which is why we're friends. That's why we get along. Asking yourself the hard questions, doing the hard work of becoming someone that people want to hang around with, becoming someone who's people who people want to go to his party or his events, also known as events, right? And gather around and share stories, regardless of their ego or their past or who they are. They want to come hang out with you. That's the authenticity people are looking for. It's, hey, this was hard, but I kept doing it. There were days I gave up. I I I signed this book deal 5 years ago and I didn't write it because I went through a divorce. That's authenticity. Transparency is reserved for very few people in my life. For my counselor, God himself, right? I didn't go on Facebook and spill all the nasty details. That's not going to help anybody. That's not being a leader. But being authentic is saying, hey, life's been hard. It's been a struggle. I'm going to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Or authentically, I need some help. But you call the people you know around. That's really where it starts. Be the person you're trying to sell to people, and ask yourself that simple question: can you build a campfire around what you're sharing?
Dude, I love that analogy. Number one, I love the way that you approached it. And that's 100% true. Now, I know there's a lot of people listening to this show right now, and they're like, I love this. I want this. I don't know what I bring to the table. So how do you people, like, obviously, look, you did copywriting in your job before you left onto your own. And then that was you going, I needed to strip away everything and do the work that got me paid, which is how I started too. Same thing. So how do people pinpoint what it is that they're the master of, that they go, this is my thing that I'm going to be the face of, I'm going to be the brand?
I love this. This is true story. This happened to me because I was just as frustrated as everybody else, trying to figure myself out when I was starting out. So one day I just started writing down everything I did at every job that I held. Now, I don't go into this in depth in the book because it would have been like 2 pages long, right? But I had a short-lived career in telemarketing. I tell the story about that. I had a short-lived career in Chase Mellon Investor Services, working the phones and dialing for dollars, right? I was an SAT high school teacher. I taught SATs and ACTs for Test Prep Academy. I was the music director at a church, and I was the CMO for this company. All before I was 34 years old. I mean, this is a lot of stuff. So I wrote down everything I did at all these jobs, even what was not on the job description. And I realized I had a lot of soft skills. So it wasn't just, I speak at the church or I recruit music team volunteers. It was also I mentored younger leaders, or I mentored musicians, or I, called people on the phone, cold called them and did telemarketing, or I hosted conferences. I marketed music albums. I taught freaking high school kids. Okay. So I wrote all this down and I took my pen. I do not know to this day. I don't remember where this came from. I think it was just, I was like, what happens if I cross off the end of each of these sentences? And I looked at this thing and it stared back at me. I spoke, I taught, I hosted conferences, I marketed, I sold on the phone, and I mentored people, I coached people. And it was like I saw myself for the first time, because so many of us see ourselves first through the lens of the organization that we work for, and we don't see who we are for ourselves. I was like, that's Mike Kim.
Mm.
It's not chief marketing officer at MEK Review or music director at CLG. That's not Mike. This was
Wow.
Mike. And I want to encourage everybody who's listening, if you're stuck, and do this periodically, don't do it just once. That helped me rebrand myself to myself.
Yeah, that's powerful. Like I've never even thought about that, and wow, that's insanely powerful. And I encourage people to pause this and do that right now. Just do it. Like there's so many people that'll listen to this and then forget about that 6 hours after they listen to this. Pause right now and do that, and then come back, because we're about to go into 2 other cool, really things I really want to talk about that are in the book. And in the book, Mike, you talk about how-topreneurs and ideapreneurs. And I love these analogies that you have and what that means. So let's talk about what that means, and then how do we figure out which one works best for us?
So a few years ago, my sister, Esther, she hands me this book, and it's called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by an author named Marie Kondo. She's a cute little Japanese lady, right? And my sister tells me I should read this book, and I go, are you trying to say I'm dirty? Like, what are you what are you implying here, right? And the premise of the book is that you go through your house, all your clothes, everything that you own, and you ask yourself, you're holding up this mug, for those of you who are watching on video see this, and you ask the mug, does this spark joy in my life? And if it's not a resounding yes, I thank the mug for being in my life and I get rid of it. Or as normal people call it, chuck it in the trash.
Yeah.
Now, I share this story because there is a very big but unseen distinction between the 2 types of entrepreneurs in this expert and creator space. The first is a how-topreneur, and a how-topreneur teaches you how to do something or does it for you. It's very curriculum-based. It's a process. An ideapreneur is more of a philosopher. They're trying to spread an idea or raise awareness. They're not even necessarily trying to solve a problem. Some are, but many do not, and that's okay. If Marie Kondo titled her book, How to Clean Your House, You Dirty SOB, right? Okay, that's straightforward. Okay, that's straightforward. But here's the problem. Being clean means something different to every single person. Everyone's got a different definition of it.
Right.
So if I'm not convinced I have a problem, I'm not buying that book. That's why I reacted that way to my sister. The beauty of Marie Kondo is that she's an ideapreneur, not a how-topreneur. The life-changing magic of tidying up. People don't realize that her book isn't about cleaning.
Yeah.
It's a book about Shintoism, which is the Japanese, religion, really. And Japanese culture espouses minimalism. It's never busy. It's sleek, right? And it has a lot of space. So she's really like, her book is really Shintoism hidden, disguised as a cleaning book.
Yeah.
And there's a big distinction between the two. I'm a how-topreneur. People say, fix my marketing or do it for me or teach me how to do it. The advantage of that is the problem I solve is very clear. The disadvantage is I have a lot of competition. With an ideapreneur like Marie Kondo or even Brene Brown, who I share about in the book, and I can go into this a little bit more, is that she is spreading an idea and trying to raise awareness of a problem first and see it in a different light. Not calling someone a slob, but saying you can live a more magical life if you take the things in your house that don't spark joy out. That's brilliant. Now, the advantage is she has a unique idea, so no competition. The disadvantage, 9 out of 10 people are like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, no, it's true. And obviously it's worked out for her. It's worked out for Brene Brown. And I love the idea of both of these because I've started out as a how-topreneur. How do you podcast? How do I do this? How do I make it work? How do I do this? I'll do it. Teach me how to do it, or you do it for me. And I had that set up. Great. And I still do that. It's still a portion of my income, but I've progressed into an ideapreneur by talking about what has become clear during the pandemic. We talk about slowing down, which is the 4 pillars, the overcoming limiting beliefs, and the 3 steps in order to do it. So these ideas of like, if we focus on the right things, it becomes fulfillment in our life. And that's really what we're all seeking. And so that's been my progression over the last year and a half, 2 years, and become super clear over the last year. And so it'll be interesting as I read through the book, really, how do I do this the right way? And I know you share a lot of that in the book. And that's what's neat about you. Like, you literally tell people how to do it. It's not just like these over the top ideas or fun things or whatever. And that's why you're so good at what you do, man. And I want to talk a little bit more too. I want to get into this quick before we run out of time. I want to talk a little bit about the pricing of all of this. Right. And I think pricing is something that people skate over. People are like, oh yeah, I'll just throw a price out there and it'll work, or I'll make it so cheap so many people will just say yes, or hey, I'll overprice it, only need 1 client. How do you know what to charge for this? Because you see it across the board. This is a free webinar. This is a $97 upsell. This is the $7,000 whatever. How do you do it the right way and not confuse people?
For most people, the place where they need to start is, and I talk about this, ask yourself, what is your traffic from hell hourly price? Because that gives you a baseline. So what I mean by that, people ask me all the time, how do you know what to charge per hour? Now, by and large, in my line of work, I don't believe by charging for the hour, right? Because, there's too many other things. I believe more in value-based pricing, but
right.
I always start here. So I called you up, I called you, the listener, up, and I said, hey, I'm in New York City. You've got to drive 30 minutes through the worst traffic from New Jersey into Manhattan. Take your pick. Holland Tunnel, Lincoln Tunnel, George Washington Bridge, the place where dreams go to die, because the traffic's so awful. And you got to drive 30 minutes through that traffic, pick up a check from me, and drive 30 minutes back home. How much does that money need to be? $100? $500? $1,000? $5,000? Start there, because at least you have a ballpark idea. Okay, at least. Now, secondly, and I honestly think this is worth the price of the book alone. There's this diagram inside the book called the 9-box grid for pricing. Okay, and I was taught this by a guy named Kirk Bowman, who basically runs a software company. And he was pitching projects all the time, and I kind of put my own spin on it. So shout out to Kirk. But on one side of the grid, you have the level of service that you're providing, like the level of engagement, because we all have different levels of engagement, right? So good service or minimal engagement might be like the client's driving the car and you're sitting in the back seat. You're just kind of advising them. The standard level of service might be the client's driving the car, but you're sitting in the front seat and you're kind of directing them more. The top level of service might be you're driving the car and they're sitting shotgun. Okay, so there's those 3 different levels of service. Then along the top of the box, right, across each column, you write the least amount of money you charge for all 3 of these levels, the regular amount of money that you charge for all these 3 levels, and then the win charge for all these 3 levels. Now, if you don't, you got to do this.
Hold on one second. You froze on me. You're back now, though. You
right.
Talked about the pricing on the right-hand side was the last thing I heard.
Okay. So the windfall amount is on the right-hand side. And if you don't set a windfall amount, you will never win a windfall contract. Now, fill in these numbers in the boxes. And I bet you are going to see some real discrepancies. And you're going to start, wait, this is the highest level of service. And yet I wrote here for this project that I would charge this amount of money, and it's the same amount of money as the lowest amount of service. And just visually seeing it, you're going to start to see where the discrepancies are. Because how we think, bro, is that most of us look at a contract and say, what's the least amount of money I would do this for? And we go in with that positioning and that frame of mind because we don't want to charge so much that we lose the contract. But we also have some sort of internal dialogue like, okay, I would do it for this amount. I would feel like crap, but I would still do it for this amount. Now you've put yourself in a no-win situation. I price every project looking at this 9-box grid. Now it's up to me which 3 numbers I present to the client. I just did this with a client recently. An entire organization, right? They're like, we want you to drive the car. We'll sit shotgun. That's what they literally said because I gave them that verbiage.
Right.
And I said, okay, but I'm still going to give them 3 prices. You drive the car, I'd sit in the back seat, $50K for the year. You drive the car, I'd sit shotgun, $75K for the whole year. I drive the car, you sit shotgun, $125,000 for the whole year. They took it. Now,
Wow.
here's the thing. All those 3 numbers were the least amount of money I would have done any of those things for because I priced the client, not the project, and they need a lot of help and they don't have a lot of funding. It's an organization, but they don't have deep pockets.
Yeah.
If a bank called me, that highest number would have been more than double. I'm
Yeah.
like, you guys are a freaking bank. It's $325,000.
Yeah.
This gives you so much latitude and leverage, and I don't feel bad because I know I did the work, and the only guy I can blame that I didn't get paid enough is the guy in the mirror. Because I gave them my highest level of service at the least amount of money I would do it for, and I'm happy. That right there alone, just buy the book just for that grid. It's worth the $15 or whatever it's on Amazon, and grab it. That'll help you a lot.
I love that you talk about pricing for the client. I think that's huge. And here's just to say one more thing about that. Like, I work with multiple 7-figure influencers and entrepreneurs. If I were to price them like I price the guy down the street that wants to work with me, they'd laugh in my face because they know that I'm not stepping up to their standards. So you have to price to the client because then they know that they're getting quality and you're going to give them your best, et cetera, et cetera. One more thing I want to touch on, we've got a couple more minutes, is the idea of relationships. You know, I know that this is something that I speak about. It's one of the 4 pillars. It's something that without the relationships that I've built over the last 5 years, I would be doing nothing that I'm doing. I know you're really big on relationships and you form tight bonds with individuals like a Jeff Goins or whoever that really has helped you, not only from a standpoint of business, but also just as a friend. So what is your idea of the importance of relationships and why is that so important to you?
Well, relationships are rocket ships. You know, there years ago when I was working that church job when I was in my 20s, one time I was tasked with hosting one of the guest speakers. Dude, bro, this guy was so out there. He was a Ghanaian king, a king from Ghana who lived in North Carolina, and he came to speak, okay? And because of his political status, he had a lot of connections. So I'm driving this guy around, and he's on the phone. This is when cell phones were pretty new. And he's talking to like Kofi Annan, like from the United Nations in my car, like crappy little Volvo. I'm like, this is so weird. And so I spent a lot of time with this guy, and he was very charismatic. And he goes, son, you're really talented. But I'm telling you right now, life is 90% who you know, 10% what you know. And I was like, whatever. He's full of crap. He's just saying that because he's a king or whatever. It's his business to know people, right? And the older and older I got, the more I realized this was true. Lone Rangers don't make it in this business. They just don't. I don't care how introverted you are. You need friends. I'm an introvert. You need friends. Now, when it comes to framing these relationships, sometimes we get them a little bit confused. So here's the little framework that they proposition. Partner up, collaborate across, mentor around. So that spatially gives you some understanding on how to treat relationships. There are some folks, I mean, they are a partner up for me. Like working with them, doing client work with them was good for me, even though they pay me. John Maxwell, Donald Miller from StoryBrand. These guys were partner ups. Yeah. So I got to bring something to their table that they needed, but they also, by virtue of working with them, gave me a level of authority that I couldn't have gotten on my own. A collaborate across is like, we're friends. we're like kind of on the same level, and we're going places together. I remember 7 years ago, one of the guy at that stage in my life, a guy who was a partner, a collaborator across, was Jared Easley, who went on to start Podcast Movement. I didn't know that at the time. Dude's
Yeah.
got the biggest freaking podcast conference on the planet. He was just Jared to me. And all these years later, though we don't talk as much as we used to in the initial days, there's a special rapport because we grew up, quote unquote, in college together,
Right.
entrepreneurial college. So what happens is a lot of these folks see people like that and they're elitist. They just hang out with each other. No, no, no. They just went to school together. Right. So we just collaborate. There's a deep-seated friendship and rapport
Yeah.
there. Right. And then the mentor round is, of course, your tribe, your team members, the people who you are serving, who are around you. So hopefully that spatially kind of gives folks an understanding of how to look at these different various relationships. And then it can reveal to you how to serve people in those different levels. There's nothing I could do to bring John Maxwell more money in of myself, or Michael Hyatt, who was one of my early mentors. But what I could be to Michael Hyatt was his best case study,
Yeah.
because he didn't necessarily want to be my buddy. I was just a student, but I became one of his best case studies. He put me on his webinars.
That's awesome.
That's what he needed. What I needed when I called you, or what you needed when you called me, was like, hey, come speak in New Orleans. Hey, bro, can you help me out? I've got my book coming out, and we're collaborating across.
Yeah.
Right. And then my tribe, I'm mentoring them, I'm coaching them, I'm helping them. That's really how it works.
Dude, I love the way you frame that. And it's so true. And I like it, you saying it that way. I'm like, oh, I kind of do that. And I didn't realize I was doing it that way. And it's absolutely genius. And I've got people in all of those places. Very rarely do I find individuals who have people set up that way. So if you do it intentionally, it changes the game. It really is. Like you said, relationships are rocket ships. And, without a doubt, like that's 100% true. So before I get to the last question that I want to wrap up with, since you've already been on, I can't ask you the same last question that I asked you 8 months ago or a year ago, whenever it was. Actually, it might have been 2 years ago, which is kind of crazy. But with that being said, how do people get the book? Obviously, it's filled with knowledge. Everybody knows that I back you 100% with any of the information you put out there. So how do people get a hold of it?
It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you grab the book anywhere, go to youarethebrandbook.com. You can also buy it from us directly if you'd like, and we get more of the revenue off of that. But either way, go to youarethebrandbook.com, send in your receipt. We're going to give you these 5 incredible bonuses: templates, website wireframe examples, how I wrote the book. That video, I think I got to say, is pretty good. It was really inside thinking on how I wrote the chapters, how to protect your intellectual property. There's some good stuff there.
That's
So all of
huge.
that is free. That goes right along with the book at youarethebrandbook.com.
Yeah. So this will probably be the first time anybody even knows that I'm writing a book through my podcast, since you spilled the beans.
Crap.
It's
Okay.
no, you're good. You're good. It's actually good that it's out there now, because it means it's got to get done. So with that being said, I need to take advantage of that, since you tell how you wrote the book and all the things in between. Dude, this has been an incredible conversation. I want to wrap up with this question. I usually wrap up with, in your life, what's been your biggest moment of growth? But my question for you is, during the course of writing this book, what has been your biggest moment of growth or takeaway?
The consistency of showing up every day. I didn't write the book every day, but it was on my mind every day. And I think this was the most important thing to me. I had to find my own way of making it work. I heard all these people, get your butt in the chair and plow through and write it. Dude, that didn't work for me. I wrote half my book on my phone.
Mm.
I got off of Scrivener, which was another obstacle because it's some sort of book writing program.
Yeah,
and I
I've
was like,
heard
I don't
of it.
want to learn a new software program. I pasted the whole stupid thing into Google Docs. This is during the pandemic and the lockdowns. I was fortunate to have a friend who runs a bar in Virginia. They were closed and they were doing some work, and you can just come over here and just hang out while we're working. And I went over there, no one's in the bar, and I'm just clacking away on my phone. And it actually helped me write it better because I read on my phone a lot, and it was short. It was easier to catch errors. I wrote half the book on my phone. And
awesome.
that's just what worked for me. So that's kind of the big takeaway from this experience. Find what works for you.
I love it, man. Guys, make sure you go grab Mike's book wherever he said to get it, Amazon or his website or whatever, but also double down and get the free stuff, because I know that the content that he puts out is absolutely unmatched. Mike, this conversation has been phenomenal. Thank you so much. I look forward to hanging out in New Orleans in October, but I will see you soon, man.
Heck yeah, brother. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.